Hello, everyone. This is Nishant here. Glad to be here with the webinar on assets. Assets has always been my favorite topic. I've been in this space for 18 years, implementing assets, not only for, employee data. It can be anything from inventory, from maybe, having assets information, storing train positive train controls for safe riding, or even rape kits for detective work in police departments. So Assets has the flexibility to store any operational data set your organization depends on, right? So it can be employment information, as Prabhu said, the identity, access data, device inventory, licenses, the app entitlements of those for that employee and more. So access doesn't become valuably simply by storing data. Its true value emerges when organizations thoughtfully design their schema and automate the flow of high quality data into it. Why is this very much important? Because once you have bad data, or you can throw in so many data into the CMDB. I've seen customers, after a point in time, they can't actually maintain it. So it's very much important to actually to have that thoughtful design of the schema. So in this page, you can see the onward fetches the employee data from the HRS system, like let's say Workday or ADP or factors, and it fetches things like name, email, which is very much important for in Jira world, the account ID, right? So we need to look up the account ID through the email, the title, the department. So the department can dictate a few other things in the automation rules. The manager for approvals. So who will be that employee's manager? And let's say the employee type, it's a full-time employee, part-time employee, contractors. So this can be in a real world scenario, it can be like, oh, I'm requesting a software. Am I entitled to it? If I'm entitled to it, who are the approvers? Maybe the full-time employee might have full access. The contractor might need additional layers of approval, maybe a specific approval, maybe a manager approval. All these things can be data driven. And of course, the office location, which ties into the facilities schema if you do so. And then it also bring the identity data, right, from Okta, things like users, groups, apps, license tiers, things like access roles. What is the MFA status of that identity? So this builds the account, group, license, and entitlement object types in the schema. And uh, and finally, as Prabhu mentioned, we can also fetch device data such as laptops, inventory, phones from Intune, Jamf, or Conjay. And we'll have things like serial numbers, device, encryption status, OS versions, and the other metadata associated with it, right? So this also enables things like automated asset assignment, offboarding collection flows, as Prabhu mentioned, and compliance aware approvals. So everything is mapped to this asset schema, enriched and normalized, deduplicated, and relationally linked to it, right? So, and finally, a tool like Onward will be loading the cleanest data set into the assets via the tool. At this point of time, assets as a whole becomes a central operational graph used by Jira Service Management. So that's the consumers, right? The consumers are the users via the Jira Service Management. Prabhu, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide, we more demonstrate like how JSM uses asset data. For example, a user submits a request, right, for a new hire onboarding. So again, the automation triggers, it queries the assets, it looks at the role, department, manager, the required access, and then the JSM dynamically generates subtask. Even the subtask can be stored in assets. We can have a certain number of subtasks for certain kind of roles, and we can populate the task via automation, right? And also provision actions. You can have further provisioning actions to, let's say, Okta or Entra ID or Slack, for example, as well. So all these dozens of manual steps are replaced by automation, and which also kind of ensures that consistency across onboarding and access controls as well. So here's where everything we just talked about comes together, right? When assets is modeled well, I'm going to reiterate it many times because it's very much important, right? When it's modeled well, the JSM automation stops behaving like a simple rule engine and starts behaving like a context-aware decision engine. So instead of relying on like a static, hard-coded workflow condition, JSM evaluates real dynamic information inside the assets graph, identifying who the employees are, what identity they have, what hardware they own, which license or they already consume, and what they are entitled to receive. So many things can be done through that. And because all these are in the connected graph, we know the correct manager, whether the person needs a PC or a Mac, if the license already exists, and automatically assign the onboarding task as I mentioned. So this is the power of context, right? Automation becomes more adaptive, not static. Provisioning becomes more accurate. There's no guesswork involved, and approvals becomes instant and not manual. The entire employee lifecycle becomes self-driving. And this is why assets is far more than a CMDB. A CMDB was the initial concepts, but it's the operational memory and the decision layer of our ITSM ecosystem altogether. So let's pause a bit, right? So I spoke a little bit on the employee dynamics and employee onboarding example. So beyond employee and device data, I mentioned about rip kits by the police departments. Assets can also power some of the most advanced operational use cases, especially in change management and maybe in SecOps, right? In change management, you can store risk models by scoring directly into assets. You can have a business service of higher risk, and we can correlate it with service criticality, dependency depth, incident history, blackout windows. So JSM can calculate this change risk dynamically instead of relying on this manual judgment or static workflow branches. Another use case is around standard changes. You can have, maybe you are submitting a change often, and this is kind of like a pre-approved change. You can store that in assets. So whenever a change matches a standard change, you have all the implementation plan, test plan, rollback plan, who owns the team, and JSM can auto approve it, generate tasks, and bypass maybe CAB entirely by it. And another example I can give is around operational standards and policies where assets can store practice-wide logic like priority metrics, SLA tiers, who are the required approvers. Sometimes you may have a set of approvers for a certain set of applications. Maybe it is for maybe a FedRAMP environment. You need additional approval layers, and you can store those approvers in in assets. So think about it as a container of objects as well, right? It's container of objects and how you actually derive your functionality and solution through that. And finally, you can also have things like SecOps data, storing device compliance, privilege access controls, some of the app risk categories, vulnerability severity in assets. So you can, when those kind of issues comes through your workflows, you can block risky requests. You can escalate approvals or notify SecOps based on the real-time posture. So in short, with these patterns, assets becomes more than a CMDB,
Yep.
and it becomes the governance and decision engine for your change risk and SecOps workflows. So yeah, I'll stop there. Pramod.